House will now come to order. Just take your seats. Leading us in prayer today is Pastor Mark Chase, the volunteer Capitol Chaplain, and that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by our pages Julia Loudenberg from Spencer and Kaylee Schmidt from Sioux Falls.
Please join me in prayer. Almighty God, as our House of Representatives begin another afternoon session on this first day of Lent, we humbly come before you to acknowledge that you are sovereign, that you are the one who made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm, that you are the God of our salvation and the one who established governments. With this in mind, we pray that your sovereign will, that your purposes for our state will be done in this chamber today and in the days to follow. We pray that your love, grace, mercy, kindness, patience, wisdom, and truth will guide each representative as they stand to explain a bill, speak for a bill, speak against a bill, or simply listen to the arguments given on either side of a bill. Grant to each representative clarity of thought. And Lord, where there needs to be a change of thinking in regards to a particular bill, we pray that you would make that happen. Finally, Lord, we pray that all that would be done in this chamber this afternoon and in the days to follow would be done to your glory and to your honor. And in the words of our late President, John F. Kennedy, we pray that each representative would not seek the Republican answer or the Democrat answer, but that they would seek the right answer, that they would seek your sovereign will on all matters that they will debate this afternoon and in the days to follow. We humbly pray all of this in the one name that is above all other names, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, ladies.
Clerk will call the roll.
Representative Anderson, Bartling, Beal, Bolin, Bordeaux, Bruner, Campbell, Conzett, Craig, Cronin, Deutsch, DeSanto, Dryden, Duvall, Fikert, Gibson, Gosh, Greenfield, Hager, Harrison, Haugard, Hawks, Hawley, Heineman, Holmes, Hunhoff, Hunt, Jensen, Johns, Kaiser, Killer, Kirschman, Klum, Langer, Lateral, Marty, May, McCleary, Mickelson, Munsterman, Norstrup, Otten, Partridge, Peterson, Qualm, Rasmussen, Ring, Romkema, Rounds, Rosum, Russell, Schaefer, Schoenbeck, Shanefish, Shrimp, Sly, Soley, Solom, Stalser, Steinhauer, Stevens, Tulson, Verschio, Werner, Westra, Weck, Willardson, Woolman, Zickman, Speaker Wink.
Here.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Approval of the journal.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Legislative Procedure respectfully reports that the Chief Clerk of the House has had under consideration the House Journal of the 18th day. All errors, typographical or otherwise, are duly marked in the temporary journal for correction, and we hereby move the adoption of the report. Respectfully submitted, Dean Wing, Chair.
Those in favor of approving the journal signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Journal's approved. Representative Peterson.
Personal privilege, please.
Granted.
On behalf of Representative Shane Fish and myself, I'd like to introduce the senior class from McCook Central and their principal, Brad Seamer, and government teacher, John Lyon. They're here with us today.
Welcome to the Capitol. Go ahead.
On behalf of Representative Shane Fish and myself, again, we'd like to introduce the senior class of Montrose and their teacher, Mr. Heisinger. here in the gallery somewhere as well.
Raise your hands. Welcome to the Capitol. On behalf of Representatives Greenfield and Tolson, I think the teachers from Hamlin Schools, Shanna Simmons, the 5th grade teacher, and Jennifer Dorn, the art teacher, are here. Are they in the, here we are up here. Welcome to the Capitol. Let's go. The South Dakota Arts Council and Arts South Dakota were with us previously. And on behalf of Representative Bruner and myself, we'd like to welcome South Dakota artist laureate Dale Lampfer. Is Dale in the audience here? There he is back up in here. Representative Deutsch? Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Representative Schoenbeck and Representative Solom and myself, I'd like to welcome the Watertown crowd here, Superintendent Leslie Jennings and her crowd.
Okay, welcome.
Mr. Speaker, personal privilege again, please.
Granted.
I'd like to also welcome Superintendent Dean Christensen from Clear Lake.
Very good. Chief Clerk. Communications.
February 10th, 2016. Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Representatives, I have the honor to inform you that on February 10th, 2016, I approved House Bill 1002, and the same has been deposited in the office of the Secretary of State. Respectfully submitted, Dennis Dugard, Governor.
Reports of standing committees.
The Committee on State Affairs respectfully reports that House Bill 1163 do pass and be placed on the consent calendar, House Bill 1214 do pass as amended, and House Bill 1155 and HCR 1010 were referred to the 41st legislative day. Brian G. Gosch, Chair. The Committee on Judiciary respectfully reports that House Bill 1237 was tabled. G. Mark Mickelson, Chair. The Committee on Education respectfully reports that House Bill 1118 do pass and be placed on the consent calendar. House Bill 1189 do pass as amended, and House Bill 1168 was deferred to the 41st legislative day. Jacqueline Sly, Chair. The Committee on Commerce respectfully reports that House Bill 1213 do pass and House Bill 1121 do pass as amended. Tim Rounds, Chair.
Messages.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to return herewith House Bills 1025, 1027, 1033, 1039, 1056, 1063, 1066, 1100, 1101, and 1103, which have passed the Senate without change. Also, Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to transmit herewith Senate Bills 5, 70, 85, 91, 103, and 148, which have passed the Senate, and your favorable consideration is respectfully requested. Respectfully, Kay Johnson, Secretary.
Motions.
Representative Wick moves that the House do concur in Senate amendments to HCR 1005.
That motion having been made and seconded for the Senate amendment to House Concurrent Resolution 1005 to be concurred is now up for consideration. Are there any remarks? Representative Wick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. HCR 1005 was amended in the Senate. A very slight change in a couple of words does nothing to change the reasons I brought this resolution, and I concur in their amendment. Yesterday, as you may have heard, the Supreme Court of the United States temporarily halted implementation of the Clean Power Plan, but that discussion is not over. EcoWatch posted the following news story. This decision is not the final word from the justices. The case is likely to return to the Supreme Court after an appeals court hears a challenge made by a group of more than 24 states, led by West Virginia and Texas. The temporary hold has proponents of the plan worried, though, because it's an early hint the program could face a skeptical reception from the justices, reported the New York Times. The White House said in a statement that it disagreed with the court's decision and remained confident that it would ultimately prevail. The administration, quoting now, will continue to take aggressive steps to make forward progress to reduce carbon emissions, end quote. This resolution is important in the adoption of the state implementation plan that I originally spoke of when we adopted this resolution. Public meetings are going to be held in Millbank and Brookings. Details about the meetings can be found on the South Dakota DENR website. I encourage you to support this amendment and this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wick. Further remarks on House Concurrent Resolution 1005. Further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, the question for the House is concurrence of the Senate amendment to House Concurrent Resolution 1005. Those in favor vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine and the members will proceed to vote.
Solon votes aye. Hickelson votes aye.
He's in approach. He's in approach.
How about May? She's here.
May's here.
Representative Anderson? No, he's back there. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 64 yeas, 4 nays, 2 excused.
House Concurrent Resolution 1005, having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby adopted.
House Concurrent Resolution 1012, requesting the South Dakota Congressional Delegation to introduce legislation to compensate private landowners for fire damage caused by the United States Forest Service. Representative Marty moves that HCR 1012 be adopted.
That motion having been made and seconded for House Concurrent Resolution 1012 to be adopted is up for consideration. Are there any remarks? Representative Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This fire was started in 2013, and it's called the Peture Fire in Perkins County, South Dakota, and was set in 2013 as a prescribed burn to burn approximately 200 acres. The Forest Service has admitted that there were conflicting weather and condition reports. Multiple concerns about the safety and responsibility of setting the fire and correspondence from Forest Service staff advised against the plan. Forest Service, however, ordered the burn to proceed. The fire escaped the boundaries and ultimately burned 10,000 acres of land, 7,000 of which was private property. The Forest Service admitted and said that they would ultimately pay for all damages. And we are requesting our South Dakota delegation, congressional delegation, to introduce legislation to compensate the private landowners for the fire damage caused by the United States Forest Service. And that's been 2 years, and now the Forest Service has said they will not pay for this. And I just urge you support yes on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Marty. Any further remarks on House Concurrent Resolution 1012? Any further remarks on House Concurrent Resolution 1012? Hearing no further remarks, the question for the House is adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 1012. Those in favor vote yea. Those opposed, nay. Clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote.
Langer votes aye.
Representative, go ahead.
Partridge votes aye.
Personal privilege, please.
Granted.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome to our state's capital the Planned Parenthood and NARAL Pro-Choice South Dakota Choice Matters Lobby Day attendees. They're back here behind us in the gallery.
Welcome to the Capitol.
Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 68 yeas, 2 excused.
House Concurrent Resolution 1012, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is hereby adopted.
Representative Gosch moves that when we adjourn today, we adjourn to convene at 1:00 p.m. on Thursday, February 11th, the 20th legislative day.
All in favor of the Gosch motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Consideration of committee reports.
Representative Gosch moves that the reports of the standing committees on Ag and Natural Resources on House Bill 1094 as found on page 332 of the House Journal. Also, the Joint Committee on Appropriations on House Bill 1081 and 1170 as found on page 334 and 337 of the House Journal. Also, Transportation on House Bill 1164 as found on page 337 of the House Journal. And also, Local Government on House Bill 1119 as found on page 340 of the House Journal be adopted.
All those in favor of the Gosch motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. First reading of Senate bills.
An act to revise certain provisions concerning the information.
For those of you in the gallery who haven't been here before, our forefathers, our predecessors, required that we read each bill twice. Before the age of computers, they wanted to make sure every legislator had an opportunity to see what they were voting on, so they required 2 readings. Now that we have computers and the legislators can pull it up on their computers, this serves as the first reading according to our Constitution.
An act to authorize additional nursing facility beds for the Michael J. Fitzmaurice Veterans Home and to declare an emergency.
Speaker assigns to Commerce Senate Bill 70, to Committee on Education Senate Bill 5, to Health and Human Services Senate Bill 148, and these speakers requested a fiscal note on that one, to State Affairs Senate Bill 91, to Transportation Senate Bill 85, and Senate Bill 103, the Joint Rule 6D-1, I have waived that committee action. Consent calendar items.
House Bill 1207, an act to authorize the sale of certain surplus real estate at the Human Services Center and to provide for the deposit of the proceeds. House Bill 1188, an act to exempt certain operations of school buses from commercial motor vehicle fees. House Bill 1108, an act to revise certain municipal special assessment provisions and to provide for exclusion of territory from municipalities. House Bill 1117, an act to repeal certain provisions concerning the authorization for the use of other languages in public records or public meetings. And Senate Bill 14, an act to revise certain administrative provisions and repeal obsolete provisions concerning the South Dakota retirement system.
Items on the consent calendar were reported out of committee with no dissenting votes or opposition and are not subject to debate. However, questions may be asked of the sponsor. At this time, are there any questions Are there any questions on the consent calendar items? Seeing none, the question for the House is final passage of bills on the consent calendar. Those in favor vote yea, those opposed nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine and the members will proceed to vote.
Shane Fish votes aye. May votes aye. Representative Craig DeSanto and Schoenbeck. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 68 yeas, 1 nay, 1 excused.
Consent calendar items, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is hereby adopted. Second reading of House bills. Representative Gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move House Bill 1182 to precede House Bill 1208.
All in favor of the Gosh motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
House Bill 1182, an act to increase the state sales tax, the state use tax, the excise tax on farm machinery, and amusement device tax for the purpose of increasing education funding and reducing property taxes and to declare an emergency.
A few words before we get started on this discussion and debate. The guidelines for me as far as the amendments are concerned, 1182 basically calls for increased revenue to be spent on education, and there's also a portion of 1182 spent used on how we expend those funds. If the amendments do not fall within those guidelines, if they start getting into school policy, I'm not going to allow those amendments to take place. I think there's better bills over in the Senate side that they can be attached to. So that's just giving you a heads up on that. House Bill 1182, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks?
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1182 addresses two areas. First, it increases sales tax from 4% to 4.5%. Secondly, it reduces property tax for all classes. During the time of the Blue Ribbon Task Force, we looked at several options for funding sources, including state sales tax, seasonal sales tax, rural sales tax, cigarette and alcohol taxes, corporate income tax to include bank franchise tax. What we found is that the state sales tax was the most proven, stable, and has potential for growth. As one seeks a funding source, there are two main things to consider. Stability. This is a short-term consideration with few fluctuations in the dollars as they come in. And so the revenue is consistent, but that's not enough. Sustainability. This is really key. It has to be long-term, ongoing, even when any of us, and there will probably be about a third of us that are no longer in this body next year and the years after. We need to know that that source of revenue goes on and on. It is future focused, so we want to look at stability and sustainability. So why are we targeting teacher salaries as part of this discussion? Because we've been last in the nation for 25 years, but the gap's getting wider. Just a few years ago, it was $2,000, but now it's over $8,000 to get to even our closest neighbor, North Dakota. According to the Department of Labor Statistics, currently South Dakota's average wage for someone with a bachelor's degree, and teachers have bachelor's degrees and masters, the bachelor's degree is, the average salary is $62,000 in South Dakota. And if you have a master's, it's $64,000. Now, some might argue that teachers work 9 months out of the year. Well, if you take 3/4 of $64,000, one would make an average of around $48,000. That is close to the targeted teacher salary in the proposal. Well, others might say, well, the average salary in South Dakota is $37,000, but keep in mind that includes all jobs, including entry-level positions of workers with no specific job skills. Are there others who could benefit from an increased salary? Of course. In South Dakota, we do not tackle all the problems at once. We seek solutions in a methodical way. Think back, criminal justice, juvenile justice, highways, roads, and bridges, and here we are at education. This year, we're focusing on that. South Dakota is in competition with surrounding states for the teacher pipeline. School districts need to be able to offer competitive salaries to keep high-quality teachers in our classroom. This is not a one-year fix. Some years ago, the nursing profession was facing a shortage of nurses. It took about 10 years to see the results after they took actions, and it was financial, was one portion of it, that they were able to see those results. It will also take time for the changes in education. We wait a long time in South Dakota before we take on these big issues because we want to make sure it's really a problem. And our task force was able to show that this year through not only the stories that we hear, but through actual numbers and quantitative data. The second part of the bill will provide property tax reduction for ag, owner, occupied, and commercial. During the hearing in appropriations, there were proponents from all walks of life. We had business owners, economic development leaders, education stakeholders, Chamber of Commerce, and here are some thoughts. South Dakota retailers. We don't usually support a tax increase, but know the importance of this initiative. South Dakota Cattlemen's Association. We are a conservative group and usually do not support tax increase, but they support the increase in sales tax. South Dakota Farm Bureau. Members and leaders of the Farm Bureau are conservative and fiscally frugal. They recognize the difficulty in finding teachers in their rural areas, so they approved a resolution. Just today, the State Chamber of Commerce endorsed the governor's plan. We have other cities that have endorsed it. Stability and sustainability are key considerations in choosing a funding source. House Bill 1182 meets those two criteria. Please vote yes.
Thank you, Representative. Any further remarks on House Bill 1182? Representative Gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment. It's 1182-OA, and it has been distributed.
Okay. Would you like to move it at this time?
Yes, sir.
Remarks on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. What this motion does is on page 6 of the printed bill, deletes line 24, and on page 7 of the bill, deletes lines 1 and 2. This would have the effect of removing the emergency clause on the bill. It would not affect the number of votes required to pass it. Under our Constitution, Article 3, Section 1, bills that have emergency clauses should be bills that are necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, or safety, or the immediate support of state government. Removing this clause would eliminate that argument that could be made in court later if this bill were to pass and that clause was on there and whether it was properly on there or not. I would ask the body to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on the amendment 1182-OA. Representative Werner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask this body to resist this amendment and vote no. It does support our state. The June sales tax receipts that our merchants take in and our retailers across the state are received by the state in the month of July. July is the start of our fiscal year, along with our school district's fiscal year. So if we do not vote down this amendment, we are basically giving up 1 month of revenue for our next fiscal year from this source. June, which are July's receipts, are historically our second best month of the year. And this year they approached $80 million. So if you take 8, which is 4 times 1, it's 4 1/2, so it'd be 8. You divide 8 into $80 million, we're talking a $10 million vote here. That's huge. Not where we want to go. Now, why is June one of our best months? It should be obvious. We have tourists coming through our state. And in comparison to March, which is February sales tax receipts, historically is our lowest time of the year, which is probably when we have the fewest tourists in our state. The difference between July receipts and March receipts has consistently been $20 million. So that, in essence, could be your tourist effect. So now take that same formula of taking $20 million and dividing it by 8. We're talking of that $10 million, $2.5 million would be supported by the tourists that come to our state. I ask you to refuse this amendment, take a drink of water, clear your voice, and be ready to shout a loud no. Thank you.
Further remarks on the amendment 1182-OA. Representative Munsterman.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. Let's keep in mind what the intent of this bill is really all about, and that's to get our teachers at market rate as much as we possibly can and to be competitive, and that in and of itself is an emergency to our education system. And so I would align myself with the previous speaker, vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Further remarks on the amendment 1182-OA. Representative Bruner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would stand and ask you to support this amendment. I think a year ago we learned the lesson about putting emergency clauses on increases in fees and taxes. I think our retailers that are going to be collecting this tax would deserve the month. Typically when these laws go into effect the 1st of July, the reason we do that is because it gives people time to make those adjustments and to plan. And I think this is just good sense. We don't need to be causing any undue problems with the people that are basically the tax collectors in this instance. And I just think it's a great first step to pushing this bill forward, is to take off this emergency clause. Doesn't change the 2/3 vote, and I think this is a genuine effort at making this a better bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks? Representative Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been in retail for 25 years. I lived through Janklo's tax increases. It does not take 3 months to adjust to collecting additional tax, either going into it or going out of it. So I would have to say to my wonderful cohort over here, I don't agree with him at all.
Further remarks on the amendment 1182-OA. Further remarks? Representative Gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, none of the people who asked you to vote no addressed the emergency component of the emergency clause. They just told you they want it. I don't think that's a very good argument under our Constitution to ignore that part that requires it be an emergency. So with that, I'd ask you to vote yes on the amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Schoenbeck.
Well, thank you. Well, let me talk to that emergency issue. Over where I live, we have high schools that can't hire qualified teachers. I always make the joke about Waubay not having a math teacher, and how can you be a high school without a math teacher? It's like a cowboy without a horse. And I said that at a Cracker Barrel, and a teacher from Waverly came up to me and said, put us on the list too. We don't have one either. This is an emergency. It needs to be addressed now.
Thank you. Further remarks on House Bill, on the amendment 1182-OA. Hearing none, the question for being Representative Gosh's motion to amend House Bill 1182. Does any member wish the motion to amend be reread? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Speakers in doubt. All in favor of the amendment 1182 OA, please stand. Those in favor of the amendment, please stand. This division. Motion fails. Further remarks on House Bill 1182. Representative Partridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment, and it has been distributed. It's 1182 FB.
1182 FB. Would you like to move it at this time?
I would.
Is there a second? Remarks on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. The amendment before you, 1182 FB, basically deals with the internet sales tax that could be collected someday. When we look at raising revenue for teachers, we want to make sure to be fiscally responsible going into the future. This amendment allows for the money that would be collected from internet sales tax to be reverted back to the people of South Dakota. In other words, if we start collecting money with the internet and are able to do that through the streamlined sales tax, then we would be able to reduce the amount of sales tax rate that we collect in the state. 1182 goes from 4% to 4.5%. And if we collect enough money with the internet sales tax, we'd be able to reduce that 4.5%. My amendment does that, which protects the people of South Dakota, the taxpayers of South Dakota, and binds this body and is a commitment to the people of South Dakota that we will reduce the tax if we have additional revenue. I ask for your favorable consideration of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on the amendment 1182 FB. Representative Stolzer.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to invoke Joint Rule 5-17.
Representative Stolzer would like to invoke Rule 517. Is he supported? Those who would like to basically delay the motion action on the amendment for one intermeeting day. He is supported. House Bill 1182 will be calendared. There's an intervening day that needs to take place, so it'll be taken up again next Tuesday. President Zygmunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce whoever's left up here. All the people from the great city, the biggest city in the state of South Dakota, from Sioux Falls. Please welcome them to the Capitol. Please stand, folks.
Welcome to the Capitol. Representative Harrison?
Personal privilege?
Granted.
Thank you. I just want to thank my superintendents from District 23 for coming.
Thank you. Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to also thank the superintendents from District 17 for coming.
Where are they located? You see them? Welcome to the Capitol. Raise your hands. Representative Wallman.
Personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to thank the teachers and representatives from District 8 that came to support 1182 today, especially my accounting teacher, Mrs. Olson. Thank you.
Very good. Representative Fikert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to welcome and thank the superintendents and anyone from the District 1 school districts that came to listen today. Thank you for coming.
Very good. Representative Qualm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the superintendents and any other teachers that might be here from District 21.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Representative Soley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Personal privilege.
Granted.
I would also like to recognize some people, not only from my district, but from the city of Sioux Falls. And if we could have, I know we have some school board members from the Sioux Falls School District here, maybe others from Sioux Falls, teachers. Thank you for coming.
Very good. Representative Shane Fish.
Personal privilege.
Granted.
On behalf of Representative Peterson and I'd like to thank the teachers and superintendents who came from District 19.
Very good. District 19. Representative Tolson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Representative Greenfield and myself, we'd like to welcome all the teachers, administrators from District 2. Welcome to the Capitol.
Excellent. Representative Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Personal privilege.
Granted.
Yes. Could I introduce Superintendent from Howard, Mr. Todd Lee?
Very good. Wave your hand up there. Representative Greenfield, did you have somebody you wanted to introduce? No? Okay. Representative Hawks.
Personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to stand and say thank you to every single one of the teachers and educators and administrators who took a day off from their jobs today to come here and support this bill and be here to show their support. I'm sorry that you're not going to see action on this bill today. Thank you for being bold.
Thank you. Representative Conzit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to also thank the educators for coming today, and I'm sorry that you are not going to see what you thought you would come here to see today. But on a lighter note, I would like to thank my husband, who's with the Bankers Association, for coming into town today, and my 13-year-old daughter, Katie, whom when I started this process was 6 years old, now 13.
Thank you for coming.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Killer.
Mr. Speaker, personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on behalf of the South Dakota Arts Council, I sponsored the resolution. The South Dakota Arts Council, South Dakota students, artists, and artist organizations from across the state celebrate Arts Day in South Dakota today to bring awareness to the many ways that art impacts our state and people. Arts Day at the Capitol fosters discussions among the state's arts leaders, artists, and art supporters about the state and the arts industry and recognizes that South Dakota legislature for its continued support of the arts. It is an opportunity to celebrate South Dakota's rich artistic history and acknowledge the value of and public support of the arts. We want to welcome and recognize our student artists, who you all got postcards from, and the visual arts teachers for their contributions to their schools, communities, and state. We thank them for all being here and providing fantastic artwork we had to see earlier. The South Dakota Arts Council, South Dakota Arts and Cultural Institutions continues to be a vibrant part of our communities and our children's futures. You can read more about it in the annual report and joint publication provided to you today. And I also had the chance to pass out a really comprehensive report about arts on Native communities. And one quick fact is that there's 6 films made a year in Pine Ridge about different issues. So that's how important arts is to our economy and being able to get out in the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the time, and thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, Representative Killer. Any more personal privileges that we need? Any more personal privileges? I would like to ask anybody in the gallery that has not been introduced to just stand up and introduce yourself. Okay, Chief Clerk, are we ready to move on?
House Bill 1208, an act to provide for the sale of certain surplus real estate at the South Dakota Developmental Center and to provide for the deposit of the proceeds.
House Bill 1208, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment up at the front desk. 1208-OA.
Would you like to move it at this time?
Yes, I would.
Has it been, okay, it's been moved and seconded. Has it been distributed, Representative?
It has.
Okay, remarks on the amendment.
May I speak to the bill as well as the amendment?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. House Bill 1208 gives the authority to have the approximately 134 acres at the South Dakota Developmental Center at the campus of Redfield to be sold. The property would be appraised, sold for the appraised value. And then the funds would then be placed into a permanent fund for the benefit of the South Dakota Developmental Center. What the amendment does is provide that on non-trust property that's being sold, that the expenses would be taken out first before it would be put into the fund. And that's the purpose of the amendment. I'd ask for your support.
Further remarks on the amendment 1208-OA. Further remarks on the amendment 1208-OA. If not, no further remarks. The question being Representative Stevens' motion to amend House Bill 1208. Does any member wish the motion to amend be reread? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Further remarks on House Bill 1208. Any further remarks on House Bill 1208? Hearing no further remarks, the question for the House is final passage of House Bill 1208. Those in favor vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine and members will proceed to vote.
Consent votes aye. Representative Beal, Cronin, Hawks, Lateral, Mickelson, Partridge, Rounds. Representative Beal, Cronin, Hawks. Beal votes aye. Solon votes aye. Okay. Representative Cronin. Oh. You know where Cronin's at? Should I excuse him? Excuse Cronin. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
The clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 67 yeas, 3 excused.
House Bill 1208, having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby declared passed. there any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct.
House Bill 1187, an act to allow the Office of the Secretary of State to refuse to file certain documents.
House Bill 1187, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the body. House Bill 1187 comes to us from the Secretary of State's office. This bill seeks uniformity in statute. Under codified law 22-24-25, municipalities and counties have the power to regulate obscene material or obscene live conduct. Under codified law 37-6-6, trademarks containing immoral, deceptive, or scandalous matter will not be registered. Likewise, under codified law 32-5-89-2, which addresses specialty license plates, it reads, "The Secretary may refuse to issue any letter combination which carries connotations offensive to good taste and decency." I would like to read for you House Bill 1187, lines 5 through 8. The Office of the Secretary of State may refuse to file any document for any business entity, whether domestic or foreign, for profit or nonprofit, as provided in Title 47, Title 48, Chapter 37-6, or Chapter 37-11, if the document contains any letter combination that carries connotations offensive to good taste and decency or consists of immoral, deceptive, or scandalous material. Members of the body, a favorable vote on House Bill 1187 will give the Secretary of State's office the same discretion and authority to Title 47, which are our corporations, and to Title 48, which are our partnerships. Members of the House, I thank you and I encourage a green vote.
Thank you, Representative Rasmussen. Further remarks on House Bill 1187? Any further remarks? Representative Hawks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the sponsor.
Question? State your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Who exactly gets to decide what is offensive, immoral, or deceptive? May I ask?
Representative Rasmussen, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, it would be the Secretary's of State's office. They already have decided and said no to other people in the past, and it has been favorable. They have just said, all right. It's just they don't have the statutory authority as these others do. So they just want to have it the same as trademarks and license plates and such.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
Is there anywhere where it's stated what their guidelines are, or is it personal decision making? I'm curious. I want to make sure that we're taking a sustainable approach to this and so that it doesn't change from administration to administration.
Representative Rasmussen, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I think it depends on what we would all think is acceptable. And so if everybody could remember back with me to the 26th of January, we had a floor discussion here about names. And we all, I think, decided that the name Lee was an okay name. So I think that any of us who would want to put the name Lee on our license plate would be okay. But on that same day, we had another name that we shared with each other, which I will not mention today, which is why this bill comes forward to us. But we would not put that name on our license plate because that would be offensive to some people. Do we remember that? Yes.
Representative Hawks, does that answer your question?
So I think that there's already statutes for license plates, and I think they would just share that same discretion and the same statutes that they do for driver's license.
Representative Hawks, does that answer your question?
That answers my question. May I make a comment?
Certainly. Go ahead.
Okay. So therein lies my concern. I don't have another question. Thank you for answering. I appreciate it. Therein lies my concern there's an awful lot of broad we would expect, and this is what we intend, but I don't know that it is stated anywhere in law that there are guidelines for deciding what is offensive, immoral, and deceptive. My take on that might be completely different than anybody else's, and depending on how things change and the way we go with the future in terms of elections, I have significant concerns with who is deciding what meets those standards and what doesn't. And so I'm going to have difficulty supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1187? Representative Bruner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would just ask the body to pass this bill. It's a good bill. I think we all know what vulgar means and what what things are offensive to certain people, probably to everybody. So I think it's a good bill. It was well intended when it was brought, and quite personally, I would never put the name Lee on anything I've got.
Further remarks on House Bill 1187? Representative Bolin.
Thank you very much. Well, you know, a number of years ago, the FCC had a list of particular words that would not be allowed on television, and perhaps those have been revised, but there's just a basic need for, decency and just good comments. There may be differences of opinion. We're not going to be talking here about something that would be totally banned. I mean, there might be some words that we should be not allowing in particular circumstances. But this is a common sense, good bill. Pass this through, and we just need to have some basic standards. Again, at one time, the FCC had certain words not allowed on TV, similar to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further comments on 1187? Representative Schoenbeck.
The good representative from Platte and myself were a little concerned about the answer given by the representative from Turner County, because I believe Lee was described as a handsome, bright, a great name, and I think way understates the quality of that prior answer, and I just wanted to make sure that the good representative from Pine Ridge's earlier speech was properly represented on this floor.
Thank you. Representative Gosh, comment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to agree with the representative in the back from Lincoln and Union County who spoke in favor of the bill. In a court of law, the court ends up defining what is reasonable and what's not. So if anybody were to contest a decision by the Secretary of State, that's your avenue to have that ferreted out. So please support the bill. Thank you.
Further remarks on House Bill 1187? Further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, the question for the House is final passage of House Bill 1187. Those in favor vote yea, those opposed nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine and members will proceed to vote.
Representative DeSanto and Stalzer. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
The clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 67 yeas, 2 nays, 1 excused.
House Bill 1187, having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby adopted. Any question on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct.
House Bill 1064, an act to apply certain penalties regarding damages, tampering, and malicious acts to certain railroads that carry passengers.
House Bill 1064, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Verchio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to announce to the House today that I'm going to present this in the light of the presenter of the last bill from yesterday's session and take you on a short 2-hour trip through the beautiful Black Hills on a railroad train. Just kidding. This bill addresses tampering with or obstructing a railroad track. Chapter 4916A covers such situations by assessing those convicted of such activity with a Class 6 felony. Passenger tourist trains are not covered by this at this time. We are asking that the same punishment be applied. Tourist trains such as the 1880 train in Hill City, which carries over 90,000 passengers a year, should be protected. This train travels through the National Forest Service. It is not confined to a city or a park, and therefore should be afforded that same protection. I believe that people are at least equal to a load of logs or a load of wallboard on a rail car. So I would hope that you would vote yes on this bill and make the Class 6 felony also apply to passenger trains that are tourist trains. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1064. Further remarks on House Bill 1064. Hearing no further remarks, the question for the House is final passage of House Bill 1064. Those in favor vote yea. Those opposed nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote. I didn't get a chance to introduce our doctor of the day. Is Dr. Honora Henderson in the house? Dr. Honora Henderson, our doctor of the day? No? Okay. Thank you.
Representative Lateral and Westra. Lateral votes aye. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
The clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 69 yeas, 1 excused.
House Bill 1064, having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct.
House Bill 1202, an act to provide access to abandoned cemeteries and private burying grounds. Representative Gosch moves that House Bill 1202 be deferred to Tuesday, February 16th, the 21st legislative day.
All in favor of the Gosch motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
House Bill 1080, an act to make an appropriation and to transfer certain monies to the Bureau of Administration to fund a design study for a potential expansion and upgrade to the State Animal Disease Research and Diagnostic Laboratory and to declare an emergency. Representative Gosch moves that House Bill 1080 be deferred to Wednesday, February 24th, the 27th legislative day.
All those in favor of the Gosch motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
House Bill 1135, an act to establish venue for certain actions arising out of real property lease agreements.
House Bill 1135, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1135 is about a venue. If there's a breach of contract between a lessor and a leasee that arises out of a real estate lease agreement, this legislation is saying that it shall be tried in the county in which any portion of the real property is subject to that lease agreement. So if I'm in Minnehaha County and I own a rental property there, and the leasee breaks the contract and goes to Pennington County, we will try this case in Minnehaha County, not Pennington County. One of the questions I was asked in committee and was answered very nicely was, well, what if I have a farm lease over many counties, which is very typical for many of our farmers in South Dakota? It can be tried in any portion, any county that farm lease agreement is proposed. They just have to agree where that is. So I'd appreciate your favorable vote, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further remarks on House Bill 1135? Further remarks on House Bill 1135? Hearing no further remarks, the question for the House is final passage of House Bill 1135. Those in favor vote yea, those opposed nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote.
Schoenbeck votes aye. Representative Rosen. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 68 yeas, 2 excused.
House Bill 1135, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Are there any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct.
House Bill 1157, an act to require that a doctor provide a woman additional information as a part of informed consent prior to performing an abortion.
House Bill 1157, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the body. House Bill 1157 before you makes a couple of changes. It was amended in committee to correct 2 grammatical errors, and that the bill passed out of State Affairs Committee 13-0. This bill does 2 things. If you look at what it states there, it adds in on page 3, there's a couple of lines there, and it's in regard directly to drug-induced or medical abortions is what we call that. First, I'll discuss the terms a little bit, familiarize yourself, and then I'll discuss the change that we made here. By the way, the second change is the end of the bill on the last page about information that will be available. This bill is about informing the patient, the expectant mother, with her potential fetus that she has. It would require notification when the physician or healthcare provider is giving the first drug, and the first drug is mifepristone, and that's typically 3 tablets. Again, I can get into the details if you would like, but they give a 600 milligram dose. That particular drug, we call the first drug, I'll refer to it as, is given to the expectant mother in a clinic, typically, and it has to be given to someone that is pregnant for 49 days or less. Again, that's the literature that's out there. That's what the medical community deems appropriate. Another word for this drug is U486. The second drug must be given within 48 hours. And typically, it depends on the facility, but typically the woman goes home, and then she would take that drug 48 hours later. There are two mechanisms. The first drug actually is a receptor or it's a drug that competes with progesterone to make the uterus ready for the baby, increasing vascular supply, increasing the nutrients to the uterus. And basically, it interrupts that progesterone buildup, if you will, and it makes the uterus ready for the next drug, which is 48 hours later, and that's misoprostol. And that is a very common drug. That's given to induce labor. In fact, many physicians You know, a former representative that was in this body, he uses that as a labor-inducing drug. The question is whether you should inform that expectant mother that if she takes the first drug and decides not to take the second drug, what are the consequences? And I can go through some research studies if you would like. There are several studies that have been done on the effects of if she would not take that second drug. Basically, about 20% in the 5 studies that I looked at, about 20% of the time, that baby could go to term without malformations or genetic issues and still deliver the baby at 9 months or thereabouts. The question is, again, whether you should inform her that there could be a viable pregnancy throughout that process if she did not take that second drug. Presently, they are not told that. In fact, there's been some evidence to suggest that they tell the expected mother that the first drug kills the baby, which is not accurate. That's not true. By the way, the second drug then in 48 hours actually induces labor, and then it completes the surgical abortion, if you will, aborting of the fetus. So with that, I believe, as a provider, the more information, the better. It is difficult to discern sometimes how much you flood your patients with, but in this case, I think in that it's the more information you can provide that expectant mother, the better off she will be.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1157? Further remarks on House Bill 1157? Representative Hawks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to clear up a couple of things with this bill. While it is a 2-step process and there are some anecdotal pieces of evidence that might say that after taking the first set of pills that can be stopped, the process can be stopped, I think it's important for this body to understand and know that in 90% of the cases of a medical abortion, not a surgical abortion, this is a medical abortion, 90% of cases where the first pill is taken, the abortion is completed, which means that in 90% of those cases, the need for the second one wouldn't be there. That means that 90% of those pregnancies are terminated after the first set of pills is taken. To inform a woman that she has an opportunity to reverse that decision after taking those 3 pills, which soften the tissues of the uterus and cause the placenta to become disrupted, is false. It's unconscionable to give that woman that piece of information knowing that it is false. I can't even believe that we're discussing this. It's unconscionable. It's not true. And so we're going to build ourselves into a position where we are doing something not medically supported, not scientifically supported, and that I can be no part of. I urge you to vote no on this.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1157? Representative Deutsch?
Well, I appreciate the words of the former representative. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of documented cases of live births all across this nation. To suggest that providing a pregnant woman informed consent is somehow unconscionable is itself unconscionable. I urge you support of this bill.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for the body's information, Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, and the Center for Reproductive Rights have filed suit in federal court to block a section of the Arizona law requiring doctors to tell patients it is possible to reverse drug-induced abortions. It's junk science that is put forth by politicians It puts the health and safety of women at risk. The main thrust of this law is to bar women from using the federal health insurance marketplace to purchase a health care plan that covers abortions. Women who have begun a chemical abortion process and changed their minds for whatever reason should not have their babies stolen from them because Planned Parenthood or any abortionist withheld potentially life-saving facts is simply not true, because there is no credible, medically accepted evidence that a medication abortion can be reversed. This law is opposed by medical experts, including the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So this measure was written by politicians, not doctors. It's about shaming women and blocking access to a safe, legal medical procedure, which is the law of the land. Please resist House Bill 1157. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the body.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1157? Representative Boland.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Members of the body, I just would emphasize again, this bill was passed out of committee unanimously. Thank you.
Further remarks on House Bill 1157? Would anybody like to speak for the first time before Representative Heineman speaks for the second? Go ahead, Representative Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll address some of those questions. First of all, the former representative's referral to Arizona and another state's legal action actually involves the therapy of progesterone to help after the first drug has been taken. So we do not have that in this legislation. This bill does not propose anything of whether the studies would support taking additional progesterone after you've taken misoprostol, after you've taken the first drug, which is mifepristone. So the question is, even if it's a 90% abortion or drug-induced or medical abortion, there's still a 10% chance that that fetus can be viable. But the 5 studies that I looked at actually after the first drug showed there was viability from about 20 to 47%. The study that I think she's referring to is actually one that is under scrutiny right now, and that is the issue of whether progesterone actually helps with taking the baby to term after the mother has taken the first drug. And we're not asking to inform the patient of that. The follow-up therapy, that's under discussion. All we're saying is that if you decide not to take that first drug, there are options. You can have a viable fetus go to term, and I think I would urge you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1157. Would anybody like to speak for the first time before Representative Hawks speaks for the second? Go ahead, Representative Hawks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question for the sponsor.
State your question.
Can you please tell us where these studies came from, who the doctors were that performed them, and under what health care facility they were performed?
Representative Heineman, would you like to answer that question?
I do not know where the actual studies were done, no.
Okay. Representative Hawks, follow up.
I have no follow-up questions, but that's unfortunate.
Further remarks on House Bill 1157. Further remarks on House Bill 1157. Hearing no further remarks, the question for the House is final passage of House Bill 1157. Those in favor vote yea, those opposed nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote. While the members are voting, I'd like to mirror some of the comments that we had earlier in their introductions. I know there was lots of school people here and other interested parties that came to listen to the debate and the discussion on 1182. Sorry we didn't, I know you came to see final action on that. Sorry that didn't happen, but we do have a process, and sometimes it doesn't happen quite as fast or quickly as we'd like, but it is a good process, and this will give the members time to study the amendments and to touch base with our constituents back home. So thank you for coming.
Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 59 yeas, 10 nays, 1 excused.
House Bill 1157, having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby declared passed. Are there any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct.
House Bill 1136, an act to eliminate the Council on Higher Education policy goals, performance, and accountability, and to transfer its functions to the Legislative Planning Committee.
House Bill 1136, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Munsterman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. House Bill 1136 eliminates the Council on Higher Education policy goals, performance, and accountability. This council was actually created a few years ago through Senate Bill 5. Those of you that were here probably remember it. And this bill, and what it does is it actually transfers those functions to the Legislative Planning Committee. And this bill really comes out of the realization over the course of the last year that the same people that are reporting to the council are reporting to the Legislative Planning Committee the same stuff. The governor's office actually made the recommendation to us, and that's what you see in front of you. It eliminates the redundancy, of course, in our system, and I think we're always all for that. And so if there's any question, I'm happy to stand by. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1136? Are there any other remarks on House Bill 1136? Hearing no further remarks, the question for the House is final passage of House Bill 1136. Those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote.
Duval votes aye. Schoenbeck votes aye. Craig votes aye. Representative Marty. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
The clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 67 yeas, 2 nays, 1 excused.
House Bill 1136, having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby declared passed. Are there any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct.
House Bill 1169, an act to allow a school district to operate an attendance center within another school district. Representative Gosh moves that House Bill 1169 be deferred to Tuesday, February 16th, the 21st legislative day.
All those in favor of the Gosh motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Representative Schoenbeck.
Personal privilege.
Granted.
Former Senator Roger Porches is here. Roger, wave. Nobody knows you anymore.
Welcome back to the Capitol. Let's give him a hand.
House Bill 1110, an act to provide medical care for certain unborn children.
House Bill 1110, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the body. House Bill 1110 would basically seek to create a special, separate legal assistance program under Title 21 of the Federal Social Security Act. Title 21 is often referred to as the CHIP program as well. This new separate health assistance program would basically provide for the medical care of unborn children whose mothers are ineligible for coverage under Title 19 of the Federal Social Security Act. This bill would have the South Dakota Department of Social Services manage this program, create the program, and be able to promulgate rules, note, in accordance with Chapter 126. And the rules and the nature of the rules are set out on page 2 of the bill. I would like to also note that it would certainly be my intent as the sponsor of the bill that in addition to the broad terms in these rules, that we would expect feedback from the Department of Social Security relative to number of patients, dollars, and so on. House Bill 1110 and its factual basis for its need is laid out in a handout that I put on all of your desks. And that handout was prepared by Dr. Lawrence Fenton, a pediatrician currently at Sanford Hospital in Sioux Falls. He's been 38 years as a licensed physician working in this particular area. And I have no problem, if you want to read this while I'm talking, that's fine, because quite honestly, the data that Mr. or Dr. Fenton has given us is extremely on point. But he notes on the first page the relationship between no prenatal care and mortality and time in ICU units is an important consideration. He notes that lack of adequate prenatal care is cited by the Infant Mortality Task Force held here in Sioux Falls and chaired by the First Lady, Linda Dugard. It reports that the counties and countries with the highest mortality rates have the lowest rate of women receiving prenatal care. This bill is all about prenatal care. He goes on to say that the 2007 South Dakota Special Report shows that the infant mortality rate was six times higher for those moms receiving no prenatal case in the first trimester. And he goes down to the bottom of that paragraph and he says, the bottom line is no or little prenatal care leads to prematurity, long stays in the intensive care units, higher death rates, and higher long-term disabilities. On the reverse side of that paper, he talks about why does no or little prenatal care for prematurity. Well, he lists several things, and I won't necessarily read those to you, but I would say that the second section there, why does little or no prenatal care lead to prolonged stays in ICUs? He's saying there's an increasing number of prematurity cases, unanticipated surgical problems, unanticipated heart problems, unanticipated genetic problems. And he goes on to say further, what complications can be prevented with good prenatal care? Blood pressure can be treated. Infant complications due to maternal diabetes can be prevented. Maternal hospitalization can avoid premature delivery. Maternal infections can be treated early before they affect the pregnancy. Appropriate maternal medication can prevent the lifelong disability of spina bifida. Anyway, he goes on to say that in that case, in the case of spina bifida, a simple, inexpensive vitamin, basically folic acid, can take care of the problem. He also informed us that based upon his many years of experience, that if there is proper prenatal care, that might cost $2,000 perhaps. In turn, that's going to save well over a quarter
I'm
of
sorry,
a mil-
who yelled? Who yielded? Campbell yields.
Thank you, Representative. The numbers here are significant. I was just saying, prenatal care per child may cost $2,000, maybe $3,000. But if there are complications and there has to be, the child has to be put in an intensive care unit, now we're talking of over $250,000. And I think that comparison is one of the two major points in this bill. This bill basically saves babies and it saves dollars. Just think, if we took care of 4 children under this at a cost of $8,000.
Members in the back of the room, please take that conversation out in the hall. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point is right there. If we took care of 4 children with prenatal care, we're going to could save $1 million. The Department of Social Services, which is totally and fully behind this program, gave us a figure during the committee that they felt there were probably something between maybe 190 and 200 cases a year that could be prevented with prenatal care and avoid the tremendous cost. I submit, again, that this is a piece of legislation that can save the state money. There's been some question about whether or not, if we passed legislation of this nature, are we going to have a lot of people coming to the state of South Dakota? Well, to begin with, the Department of Social Services did some checking for me, and they found that there were 14 other states that have prenatal care programs like this based upon Title 21, or the CHIP program, if you would. And it was interesting to note that among the states that have similar programs are Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, in the immediate area. Now, I would submit that if anybody is going to go and take advantage of this program, as much as I believe in and love South Dakota, they may very well go to Nebraska. They may very well go to Minnesota, where there are a lot of large cities and employment. I don't think the argument that we're going to suddenly become a haven for people that would be involved in this type of medical situation. I also believe that when we talk in terms of the real savings here, it's with the children. We're saving lives. We're saving lifetime disabilities. South Dakota physicians, South Dakota nurses all came and spoke in support of this bill. I believe that if we really, truly are interested in children and interested in the prenatal care so those children do not die or do not have lifelong disabilities, that this is a piece of legislation we should get behind. The people that are the patients in this scenario have been labeled as illegal immigrants. I'm sorry, but that's incorrect information. Basically, the two titles I referred to non-citizens. As a practical matter, Department of Social Services said, we have a lot of people that come in on work visas. They're legal aliens. They come in on education visas. There are a lot of those people who would benefit from this. And if there are a few that come in that may be illegal aliens, isn't it worth, if nothing else, saving $250,000 on each one of those? I would appreciate your support of 1110 and would stand by for any questions you might have. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Any further remarks on House Bill 1110? Representative DeSanto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We love babies, but this isn't about whether we love babies. Sometimes as legislators, we have to make decisions with our heads and not with our hearts. This is one of those bills. What this bill would do, women who are here, whether they are on a visa or here illegally, would become eligible on the taxpayer dime to have their prenatal care paid for. It was asked in committee, Are these women who receive the benefit of the taxpayers, in fact, taxpayers? Or according to Secretary Valente, her response, well, if they work, but they don't have to work. Some of these folks don't. Many of these people should not be here. Are we going to reward illegal activity by allowing them to come to our state and receive services that the good taxpayers of South Dakota have entrusted to us? Also keep in mind that in most communities, there are low-income clinics and people that operate on a sliding scale fee that already provide services to these women. 15 states currently provide prenatal care to these people. This will, in essence, make us a sanctuary state that people, I believe, will choose to come here in order to receive these services. In 2013, a similar bill was brought, and LRC back in 2013 put a cost on it of $241,777 in the first year. It's hard for me to believe that since 2013 that cost would have gone down. I believe this bill is a slippery slope. It is a foot in the door for people who are here illegally to expect more and receive more. I urge you to think about the good taxpayers who have entrusted you with making good use of their funds and to get those funds to the right people. Some of these people have violated the law and our Constitution. Those are not the people that the good taxpayers have entrusted their money to, for us to give to. Again, I would like to reiterate one last time. We love babies. We love healthy babies. I've had 3 beautiful, healthy babies myself. I also have utilized low-income clinics and community health clinics, and I'm grateful for the services I've received at them. These services are available to women already. More government is not the answer. I urge you to vote no.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1110. Representative Soley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak in favor of this bill, and yes, we have seen it before, but I want to remind the body of a couple things. One is that the moment a child is born in our state, or any state for that matter, they become a citizen. So this newborn, regardless of their health or unhealth, is eligible at the moment of birth for what we call the CHIP program, the nickname for Medicaid for Children. So at that time, we become responsible, along with the federal government, to take care of that little citizen. And that, if they are not insured in another way and with certain requirements that would be similar to others on Medicaid or other children on Medicaid, regardless of whether their parents are or not. So what we're talking about here is our own responsibility for these children from the moment of birth on. And I think the good representative who just spoke mentioned a figure of around $240,000. We have heard from Representative Hunt over here that what he's quoting is the average amount of time, or average amount charged by the hospital for a baby born at less than 32 weeks was over $280,000. So just one of these little ones who's born in our state, regardless of whether their mother is a citizen, is going to cost Medicaid that much money. And since we pay about half, it would only take 2 to go over that. But I think the larger idea is to think of, some of you know refugees, immigrants who are here, you know kids who are here on student visas. A refugee in the LSS program is expected to work right away. They have a certain limited time before they start. And of course, anybody who buys anything in the state is paying sales tax. So I think it's fair to say that all these people are in some way taxpayers. So this is a win-win-win. This is a win to save lives, take care of babies. It's a money saver if that's what we're motivated by, and it's also simply the right thing to do. Thank you for your yes vote.
Thank you, Representative Soley. Representative Mickelson.
This is Mr. Speaker, members of the body. There's a lot of interesting issues in this proposed bill. And I think the testimony on this floor has provided most people that need prenatal medical care in this state receive it. Current state law allows the Department of Social Services to determine who gets medical care and who qualifies for it on any terms that they provide. As we will likely be considering later in this session, our role is to set the budget, at least under current state law. And I would just ask, as we sit here in Pierre, South Dakota, contemplating prenatal care for a category of individuals, do we need to run out to Washington, D.C., and ask them to accept this as a plan amendment to the state Medicaid plan? If this is that important to the state of South Dakota, wouldn't we be willing to pay for it ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on House Bill 1110. Representative Steinhauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question for the sponsor.
State your question.
Forgive me, possibly you said it, but the number of Title 19 ineligible mothers that had babies that had special needs in care.
Representative Hunt, would you like to answer that question?
Representative, I hate to say this, but could you repeat that question? I was having a little sidebar conversation here. Sorry.
Certainly. And I apologize, you might have said it and I missed it, but I'm curious the number of Title 19 mothers who had babies that maybe required special attention in the past year. Do you know that number?
Representative Hunt, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Representative, what I can go by is what the Department of Social Services indicated during their testimony, which was quite extensive in the committee meeting. They used the figure of about 200. Now, I didn't pin them down, nor did any member of the committee pin them down as to, can you identify what type of care, how long, and things like that. There wasn't anything like that said. But that would be my response. That's the best information that I have out of Department of Social Services.
Representative Steinhauer.
Follow up. So 200 was the number of babies born to mothers not eligible for Title 19, or babies that needed extraordinary care to mothers not eligible for Title 19?
And that's a fair question, because I kind of understood it when it was being answered by Department of Social Services, that was the number of cases where the babies had not received the prenatal care and then had to come back and have extensive care that cost over $250,000.
Representative Steinhauer, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Representative Gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move we defer action on House Bill 1110 until tomorrow, the 20th legislative day.
All those in favor of the Gosh motion to defer signify by saying aye. Aye. As opposed, nay. Motion carries. Second reading of Senate bills.
Senate Bill 10, an act to authorize the Senate Bill 10, an act to authorize the Board of Regents to contract for the renovation and construction of an addition to Harding Hall on the campus of South Dakota State University and to make an appropriation therefor.
Senate Bill 10, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. Senate Bill 10 is a bill to allow South Dakota State University to remodel one of the buildings on campus. Harding Hall, some of you may be familiar with it. At one point, they were looking at, in fact, tearing the building down. It's an older building and kind of used its useful life, but through further investigation and study, the basic structure of the building is still sound, and the value of that structure was something over $3 million to have to replace. And so rather than tear it down and then at some point have to come back and ask for money to rebuild that superstructure, they're now asking to just renovate the building. And so what the bill amounts to is asking for authority to spend $12 million in this renovation. None of that comes from general funds. $3.3 million will come from HEF funds, which is money that the colleges collect for the purpose of maintenance and repair of buildings. $5 million will come from other funds derived from tuition, and $3.7 million will come from donations and federal sources. I encourage you to support the bill and vote green. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on Senate Bill 10. Further remarks on Senate Bill 10. Due to an appropriation measure, this will require a two-thirds vote of members-elect. Question for the House is final passage of Senate Bill 10. Those in favor vote yea, those opposed nay. Clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote.
Ramkumar votes aye. Duval votes aye. Kirschman votes aye. And Stalser.
Is the doctor of the day still in the house? Might have just had a hernia on here.
And Quam votes aye, right? Okay. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
The clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 63 yeas, 6 nays, 1 excused.
Senate Bill 10, having received a two-thirds vote of the members-elect, is hereby declared passed. Are there any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct.
Senate Bill 11, an act to authorize the Board of Regents to purchase land from the Dakota State University Foundation for the use and benefit of Dakota State University in Madison, to make an appropriation therefore and to declare an emergency.
Senate Bill 11, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. This bill would allow the Board of Regents, Senate Bill 11, to acquire land from the DSU Foundation, currently used as a parking lot. The area is the chosen site for the new IT building and is to be constructed on campus with groundbreaking scheduled this spring. It appropriates up to $40,000, and that's adequate because we did get an appraisal after this bill was drafted, and the appraisal was about $30,000. So we'll actually save the state a little money there. But at any rate, the source of the funds is administrative overhead. It includes an emergency clause, making this legislation effective immediately once the governor signs it. This will allow for the transfer of the land prior to the construction starting this spring. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on Senate Bill 11? Further remarks on Senate Bill 11? Due to an appropriation measure, this too requires two-thirds vote of the members-elect. The question for the House is final passage of Senate Bill 11. Those in favor vote yea. Those opposed nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote.
I vote aye. May votes aye. May votes no. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
The clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 64 yeas, 5 nays, 1 excused.
Senate Bill 11, having received a 2/3 vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Are there any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct.
Senate Bill 17, an act to make an appropriation for costs related to suppression of wildfires in the state and to declare it an emergency.
Representative Gosh.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I would move that we defer this bill until February 24th.
Is there a second? All in favor of the Gosh motion to defer, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Senate Bill 18, an act to make an appropriation from the Coordinated Natural Resources Conservation Fund to the State Conservation Commission and to declare it an emergency.
Senate Bill 18, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 18 is a bill that authorizes the State Conservation Commission to spend funds that are deposited annually in the Coordinated Natural Resource Conservation Fund. This fund, in coordination with local effort, it's matched 1 to 3.71 in local effort. So landowners, like in a project that I'll tell you about in Beadle County, the grant provided $40,500 for a water quality for livestock project. This project was matched with $81,000 from landowners, $200 from the Beadle County Conservation District, and $400 from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. The funds that come into this account is set up in South Dakota Codified Law 10-47B-149. I'd stand by for any questions and urge a green vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on Senate Bill 18. Further remarks on Senate Bill 18. Due to an appropriation and an emergency clause, this too requires a 2/3 vote of the members elect. Question for the House is final passage of Senate Bill 18. Those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed, nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine. The members will proceed to vote.
Representative Ramkumar. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
The clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 63 yeas, 6 nays, 1 excused.
Senate Bill 68, having received a 2/3 vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct. Representative Gosh? One more, okay.
Senate Bill 68, An act to make appropriations from the Water and Environment Fund and its revolving fund subfunds for various water and environmental purposes, to revise solid waste management program recycling provisions, to revise water and environment fund loan terms, and to declare an emergency.
Senate Bill 68, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Representative Dryden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the body. The omnibus water bill has been around since 1992-93. It's an annual appropriation of money for water and wastewater projects. The bill is, the plan is developed through public hearings and a public meeting by the Board of Water and Natural Resources, and this bill is consistent with what that board and the public hearing is recommending. There are no general fund monies included in this bill. There's a special appropriation of about $16.3 million, and the money comes from several sources of fees. There's 6 fees that contribute money to this: online lottery, ticket revenue, tank inspection fees, some contractor excise tax, tipping fees, tire removal fee, and some loan repayment and interest goes into this fund to make up the $16.3 million. $2 million of dollars this year will go to the Sioux Falls Flood Control Project. $750,000 to finance an effort to model the Big Sioux River Basin post-flood analysis. $225,000 for the Big Sioux Flood Control Study in Watertown. There's $5.2 million provided for consolidated grants and loans for drinking water, wastewater, and watershed projects. There's $2.4 million for solid waste disposal and recycling projects. And the water, just in closing, the water funding bill has a long history of successfully helping local communities and to build water projects, wastewater, and solid waste projects that are good for the community and good for the economy. I'd appreciate your vote green on Senate Bill 68.
Thank you, Representative. Further remarks on Senate Bill 68. Further remarks on Senate Bill 68. Due to an appropriation measure, this too requires a 2/3 vote of the members elect. The question for the House is final passage of Senate Bill 68. Those in favor vote yea, those opposed nay. The clerk will unlock the voting machine and the members will proceed to vote.
Representative Woolman. Mr. Speaker, all members present have voted.
Clerk will please display the vote.
Mr. Speaker, there are 63 yeas, 6 nays, 1 excused.
Senate Bill 68, having received a 2/3 vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? Seeing none, the title is deemed correct. Representative Gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would defer. I would move we defer the remainder of today's calendar to tomorrow, the 20th legislative day.
All those in favor of the Gosh motion to defer the rest of the calendar signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. There being no objection, the House will revert back to a previous order of business number 5, reports of standing committees.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Legislative Procedure respectfully reports that the Office of Engrossing and Rolling has carefully compared House Bill 1025, 1027, 1033, 1039, 1056, 1063, 1066, 1100, 1101, and 1103, and finds the same correctly enrolled. Respectfully submitted, Dean Wing, Chair.
Speaker signs House Bill 1025, an act to place certain substances on the controlled substance schedule and to declare an emergency. Speaker signs House Bill 1027, an act to revise certain provisions regarding licensure of massage therapists. Speaker signs House Bill 1033, an act to revise certain provisions concerning elections and election petitions and to declare an emergency. Speaker signs House Bill 1039, an act to revise various trust and trust company provisions and to establish and regulate South Dakota Special Spousal Trust. Speaker signs House Bill 1056, an act to revise certain provisions relating to the veterans' preference in employment. Speaker signs House Bill 1063, an act to revise provisions regarding required notice of relocation of a minor child when a protection order is in place. Speaker signs House Bill 1066, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the public notice for a meeting of a public body. Speaker signs House Bill 1100, an act to set a minimum size for a sign about zoning changes or conditional use permits. Speaker signs House Bill 1101, an act to authorize municipalities to create programs to encourage housing development. Speaker signs House Bill 1103, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the qualification process for municipal office. Announcements? Do we have any announcements? Representative Wallman?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Room 414, House Commerce Energy, right after this, 4:30. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Representative Virtue?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Transportation will meet at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Qualm?
Ag and Natural Resources, 745.
Very good. Representative Munsterman?
House Health, tomorrow morning, 7:45.
Very good. Representative Solom?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Tax, 745 tomorrow morning.
Any further announcements? Are there any? Yes, Representative Otten.
House Local Governments, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, 4 bills.
Very good. Further announcements? Representative Anderson. All in favor of of adjournment? All in favor of adjournment? Signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. All those opposed, nay. We are adjourned. House will now come to order. Please take your seats. Leading us in prayer today is Pastor Mark Chase, the volunteer Capitol Chaplain, and that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by our pages Julia Loudenberg from Spencer and Kaylee Schmidt from Sioux Falls.
Please join me in prayer. Almighty God, as our House of Representatives begin another afternoon session on this first day of Lent, we humbly come before you to acknowledge that you are sovereign, that you are the one who made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm, that you are the God of our salvation and the one who established governments. With this in mind, we pray that your sovereign will, that your purposes for our state will be done in this chamber today and in the days to follow. We pray that your love, grace, mercy, kindness, patience, wisdom, and truth will guide each representative as they stand to explain a bill, speak for a bill, speak against a bill, or simply listen to the arguments given on either side of a bill. Grant to each representative clarity of thought. And Lord, where there needs to be a change of thinking in regards to a particular bill, we pray that you would make that happen. Finally, Lord, we pray that all that would be done in this chamber this afternoon and in the days to follow would be done to your glory and to your honor. And in the words of our late President, John F. Kennedy, we pray that each representative would not seek the Republican answer or the Democrat answer, but that they would seek the right answer, that they would seek your sovereign will on all matters that they will debate this afternoon and in the days to follow. We humbly We pray all of this in the one name that is above all other names, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies.
Clerk will call the roll.
Representative Anderson, Bartling, Beal, Bolin, Bordeaux, Bruner, Campbell, Conzett, Craig, Cronin, Deutsch, DeSanto, Dryden, Duval, Fikert, Gibson, Gosh, Greenfield, Hager, Harrison, Haugard, Hawks, Holly, Heineman, Holmes, Hunhoff, Hunt, Jensen, Johns, Kaiser, Killer, Kirschman, Klum, Langer, Lateral, Marty, May, McCleary, Mickelson, Munsterman, Norstrup, Otten, Partridge, Peterson, Qualm, Rasmussen, Ring, Romkema, Rounds, Rosum, Russell, Schaefer, Schoenbeck, Shanefish, Shrimp, Sly, Soley, Solom, Stalser, Steinhauer, Stevens, Tulson, Verschio, Werner, Westra, Weck, Willardson, Woolman, Zickman, Speaker Wink.
Here.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Approval of the journal.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Legislative Procedure respectfully reports that the Chief Clerk of the House has had under consideration the House Journal of the 18th day. All errors, typographical or otherwise, are duly marked in the temporary journal for correction, and we hereby move the adoption of the report. Respectfully submitted, Dean Wing, Chair.
Those in favor of approving the journal signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Journal's approved. Representative Peterson.
Personal privilege, please.
Granted.
On behalf of Representative Shane Fish and myself, I'd like to introduce the senior class from McCook Central and their principal, Brad Seamer, and government teacher, John Lyon. They're here with us today.
Welcome to the Capitol. Go ahead.
On behalf of Representative Shane Fish and myself, again, we'd like to introduce the senior class of Montrose and their teacher, Mr. Heisinger, here in the gallery somewhere as well.
Raise your hands. Welcome to the Capitol. On behalf of Representatives Greenfield and Tolson, I think the teachers from Hamlin Schools, Shanna Simmons, the 5th grade teacher, and Jennifer Dorn, the art teacher, are here. Are they in the, here we are up here. Welcome to the Capitol. Let's go. The South Dakota Arts Council and Arts South Dakota were with us previously. And on behalf of Representative Bruner and myself, we'd like to welcome South Dakota Artist Laureate Dale Lampfer. Is Dale in the audience here? There he is back up in here. Representative Deutsch? Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Representative Schoenbeck and Representative Solom and myself, I'd like to welcome the Watertown crowd here, Superintendent Leslie Jennings and her crowd.
Okay, welcome.
Mr. Speaker, personal privilege again, please.
Granted.
I'd like to also welcome Superintendent Dean Christensen from Clear Lake.
Very good. Chief Clerk. Communications.
February 10th, 2016. Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Representatives, I have the honor to inform you that on February 10th, 2016, I approved House Bill 1002, and the same has been deposited in the office of the Secretary of State. Respectfully submitted, Dennis Dugard, Governor.
Reports of standing committees.
The Committee on State Affairs respectfully reports that House Bill 1163 do pass and be placed on the consent calendar, House Bill 1214 do pass as amended, and House Bill 1155 and HCR 1010 were referred to the 41st